Hey there, Daily Gardeners. After today's show, the show will be on break for the holiday season. New episodes will resume airing on January 4th. In the meantime, you can stay in touch through the Daily Gardener Friday newsletter. It comes out every Friday and it's sent directly to your inbox. And you can sign up for that over at the website for the show, thedailygardener.org. And you can also connect through the free Facebook group for the show. It's called the Daily Gardener Community. So just search for that on Facebook and request to join, and you're in. It's just that simple. So have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I'll be back with you real soon. Here's today's show. Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's December 24th. Today we'll celebrate a Scottish baker and botanist who left a charming collection behind as his legacy. And I must say, he had a head full of dark hair, reminiscent of Beethoven. We'll also learn about the White House's first Christmas tree and the adorable grandchild who thoroughly enjoyed it. And we'll recognize the work of a woman who envisioned a world where women were taught horticulture without threatening jobs for male gardeners. And we'll hear a delightful poem called Jack Frost. It's adorable. We grow that garden library today with a book about celebrity gardens. And these folks are major trendsetters in the world of fashion and interior design. And then we'll wrap things up with a few versions of the Gardener's Night Before Christmas. And maybe they'll inspire you to write a verse of your own. But first, I just wanted to take a second to tell you about the Daily Gardener Friday newsletter. Each and every Friday, even when the show is on break, subscribers to the newsletter get an exclusive email from me with some super useful content, including helpful reminders and tips for the week to help you grow as a gardener. I also include a handy list for you that features all of the books from the Grow That Garden library that were mentioned on the show the past week. So that's all right there for you. And then I provide a brand new botanist profile along with 2 pieces of botanical poetry that have not been shared on the show. And you'll also get plenty of garden-inspired recipes, gifts, and hacks. I love all of that. And finally, I like to make the newsletter a little more personal. So you'll see photos and stories about my own home and garden, in addition to exclusive updates about the show. I think of it as a little behind-the-scenes VIP experience for super fans of the podcast. And don't forget that each week, one lucky subscriber will be chosen as a winner for a lovely gardening book from the Grow That Garden Library bookshelf. And I like to say, if you enjoy the podcast, you're going to love the newsletter. So head on over to thedailygardener.org and sign up for the free Friday newsletter today. Here's today's curated garden news. Today's article is from the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. It's written by Kathy Crosby, and the title is Brooklyn Botanic Garden in 1918, a time of pandemic, war, and poverty. Well, I found Kathy's article to be quite fascinating. This post just came out earlier in the month on December 3rd, and I thought I'd read a little excerpt for you. This is the Brooklyn Botanic Garden in 1918. This is not the first time Brooklyn Botanic Garden has faced a pandemic. The garden was founded in 1910, and just a short while later, the influenza pandemic of 1918 emerged in the United States. At that time, the effects of flu were very much intertwined with World War I, as well as other devastating illnesses. The Brooklyn Botanic Garden did not close that year because of the flu or even in prior or future years because of polio. But the garden's school group attendance dropped to near zero in October of 1918 because of the pandemic. And then she goes on to tell us about another challenge that the garden was facing. And she says, the conservatories were closed to the public at times in 1918 and 1919 because of a wartime coal shortage that endangered the plants. As much as possible, areas of the conservatories were shut off, and then, space permitting, the plants were moved in together into what was then called the economic house. Despite those measures, the garden was still not able to generate enough heat to maintain the plants perfectly, but a surprising number did survive. And you can imagine how stressful this time period was for the garden. Anyway, Kathy did an excellent job writing this piece, and I love the old pictures as well. And if you'd like to take a look at Kathy's article on the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, all you need to do is head on over to the free Facebook group for the show, the Daily Gardener Community. And then once you're there, search for the word Brooklyn, and Kathy's post will pop up. You know, I share all of my curated news articles and original blog posts with the listener community. And that way, it's very easy for you. You never have to track anything down. The next time you're on Facebook, just search for Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend and request to join. I'd love to meet you in the group. Here's today's brevities. Today is the anniversary of the death of the Scottish geologist, botanist, and baker Robert Dick, who died on this day, December 24th, in 1866. The artist Joanne B. Carr recently created a replica of Robert's moss box to honor his work. This was a little box that he used to carry moss specimens back to his bakery. Now, Joanne's moss box features fold-down flaps with delightful discoveries that call to mind the spirit of Robert Dick. And I share a video of Joanne's marvelous creation in the Facebook group for the show. So if you want to check it out, it's a masterpiece, and it's a thrill to see that video. I followed up with Joanne, and when I emailed her, I asked for her insights on Robert. And she replied with a lovely interview that she did back in 2017. Here's an excerpt. Wearing a swallowtail coat, jeans, and a chimney pot hat, Robert Dick often had children following him from his bakery in Thurso as they were curious to know what he was doing on his walks. He was not only a baker, but also a renowned self-taught botanist, a geologist, and a naturalist. Interested in entomology, he collected moths, beetles, butterflies, and bees. And to bring the samples home, he pinned them to the inside of his hat. How clever. He sounds like a Willy Wonka, doesn't he? Anyway, Joanne continues. She writes, "The Dunnet Head was one of his favorite places to walk, describing it as having a forest of ferns. The Dunnet Head Lighthouse was built in 1831, and it was an event that Robert Dick must have witnessed. Robert saved old letters, envelopes, newspapers, and documents to keep his collection of small plants and mosses. His herbarium collection is now in the Caithness Horizons Museum in Thurso, and it contains around 3,000 specimens." Now, when I was researching Robert, I stumbled on an old document, and it featured a speech by Sir Roderick Murchison, who was the Director General of the Geographical Society. And in his speech, he mentions meeting the multi-talented baker Robert Dick. Here's what he said. In pursuing my research in the Highlands, it was my gratification to meet with a remarkable man in the town of Thurso named Robert Dick, a baker by trade. When I went to see him, he spread out before me a map of Caithness and pointed out its imperfections. Mr. Dick had traveled over the whole county in his leisure hours and was thoroughly acquainted with its features. He delineated to me, by means of some flour which he spread out on his baking board, its geographical features. Another very clever idea, using flour to show the topography of the county. Sir Roderick continued, "Here is a man who is earning his daily bread by his hard work, who's obliged to read and study by night, and yet who can instruct the Director General of the Geographical Society." But this is not half of what I have to tell you of Robert Dick. When I became better acquainted with this distinguished man and was admitted into his sanctum, which few were permitted to enter, I found there busts of Byron, of Sir Walter Scott, and other great poets. I also found books, carefully and beautifully bound, which this man had been able to purchase out of the savings of his bakery. I found, to my humiliation, that this baker knew infinitely more of botanical science, 10 times more than I did, and that there were only some 20 or 30 British plants that he had not collected. These specimens were all arranged in the most beautiful order, with their respective names and habitats. After Robert's death on this day in 1866, a memorial obelisk was installed to honor him in the Thurso Cemetery. And today, the curator at the Caithness Horizons Museum, Joanne Howdle, has digitized the precious Robert Dick herbarium. And it was on this day, December 24th, in 1889, that the White House's first Christmas tree was set in place to delight baby McKee, the favorite grandson and namesake of President Benjamin Harrison. A 1967 article from the Indianapolis Star said there had never been a Christmas tree in the White House before. Some people thought the whole thing pretty frivolous, but President Harrison was adamant, and he set the gardeners to finding just the right tree. It was to be tall and full and round, like the trees he had had when he was a boy and found oranges and nuts in the toes of his stockings. All through Christmas Eve afternoon, the White House gardeners worked to set the tree in place in the library over the Blue Room, and no one was permitted to decorate the tree. That honor was reserved for the president and his wife. However, history tells us that the gardeners were allowed to stay and watch. After dinner, President Harrison and First Lady Carolyn Scott Harrison decorated the tree with fat ropes of tinsel and old-fashioned candles. The president crowned the tree with a large star, and the First Lady stretched and stooped to fill the branches with presents. The Harrison White House at Christmas was the picture of a classic Victorian holiday scene. One can almost imagine the scene that day with baby McKee, or little Benjamin, his wispy blonde hair, sailor hat, and long white hand-tucked dress, imitating the president as he walked the library with his lamb on wheels behind him. Benjamin was also quite taken with his jack-in-the-box. And today is the anniversary of the death of the influential English gardening author and instructor Francis Garnet Wolseley, who died on this day, December 24th, in 1936. A lifelong single lady, Frances devoted herself to gardening and gardening education. In 1902, on her 30th birthday, Frances created the Glen College for lady gardeners on her father's garden in East Sussex. And although her classes had only around a dozen students, Frances managed to attract the attention of some famous people, including Gertrude Jekyll, Ellen Wilmot, and William Robinson. And online, there's a fantastic picture of Frances, and it shows her mowing the lawn with a push and pull mower with the help of one of her students. They're both standing on either side of this thing. It took 2 people to run it. It's hard to believe now, but in the early 1900s, there were pictures of women mowing, and those pictures were being shown in advertisements for lawnmowers. They were trying to appeal to women to mow the lawn. In her 1908 book, Gardening for Women, Frances wrote, "It must be borne in mind that horticulture is still a comparatively new profession for women, and that unless those who enter it strive to give full time and application to learning its details, they cannot hope to be successful. They should spare no pains to gain a complete education, for only then can they expect remuneration." In Unearthed Words, today's words are from the American poet and writer Helen Bailey Davis. Here's her sweet little poem called Jack Frost. Someone painted pictures on my window pane last night. Willow trees with trailing boughs and flowers frosty white and lovely crystal butterflies. But when the morning sun touched them with its golden beams, they vanished one by one. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Gardens of Style by Janelle McCulloch. This book came out in 2018, and the subtitle is Private Hideaways of the Design World. In this book, Janelle takes us to visit the inspiring private gardens of celebrated fashion and design tastemakers. Thanks to Janelle's work, we can understand how these beautiful sanctuaries, these gardens, have influenced creative work and life. You know, throughout time, Mother Nature has been a frequent source of inspiration in the world of fashion and design. And fashion designers like Christian Dior have used gardens and botanicals in their collections. And like us, these designers and their interior design counterparts find that gardens restore their creativity and revitalize their energy. Janelle's book takes us from the lush foliage of the Dominican Republic to the graceful flower beds of America's East Coast, the charming roses and clipped boxwood of England's country manors, and the patterned parterres of France's enchanting Provence region. Gardens of Style illustrates the symbiotic relationship between horticulture and haute couture, between nature's beautiful forms and those found in interior design. For instance, the garden of former Hermes designer Nicole de Vazian is a sublime weave of patterns and textures, while the garden of Christian Dior features many of the roses that inspired his glamorous gowns. This book is 240 pages of beautifully photographed gardens to delight and inspire, along with stories that show the connection between these celebrity trendsetters and their horticultural havens. It's a beautiful coffee table book. And you can get a copy of Gardens of Style by Janelle McCulloch and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $14. That's fantastic. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. Over the years, many newspapers have shared a parody of The Night Before Christmas, written by Charles and Janice Jensen in the 1960s. The original version first appeared in the New York Times. And as I share it with you, you'll realize how far we've come since the 1960s in terms of our daily gardening practices. In any case, I'm going to share this version with you, and then I'm going to follow up with another version that was written in the 1980s, 20 years later. Here we go. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the yard, the branches were bare, and the ground frozen hard. The roses were dormant and mulched all around to protect them from damage if frost heaves the ground. The perennials were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of 5-10-10 danced in their heads. The new planted shrubs had been soaked by the hose to settle their roots for the long winter's doze. And out on the lawn, the new fallen snow protected the roots of the grasses below, when what to my wondering eyes should appear but a truck full of gifts of gardening gear. St. Nick was the driver, the jolly old elf, and he winked as he said, "I'm a gardener myself. I've brought wilt-proof, root-tone, and B9 too. Father can try them and see what they do. To eliminate weeding, I've brought 2,4-D, and to battle the bugs, 5% DDT. To seed your new lawn, I've a patented sower, and since it will grow, here's a new power mower. For seed planting days, I've a trowel and a dibble, and a roll of wire mesh if the rabbits should nibble. For the feminine gardener, some gadgets she loves, plant stakes, a sprinkler, and waterproof gloves. A chemical agent for her compost pit, and for enjoying the flowers, a flower arranging kit. With these colorful flagstones lay a new garden path for the kids to enjoy a new bird feeder and bath. And last but not least, some well-rotted manure, a green Christmas year-round, these gifts will ensure. Then jolly St. Nick, having emptied his load, started his truck and took to the road. Well, things have changed a lot since the 1960s, so if you were a little shocked by some of what you heard in that poem, let me assure you that that was all very standard protocol, standard operating procedure back in that decade. By 1987, Carolyn Roof of Paducah, Kentucky, had written her own version for gardeners in her garden column. Here's an excerpt from hers. "'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the garden, not a creature was stirring, not even a wren. The work tools were hung in the tool shed with care, in the hope that springtime soon would be there. The flowers were mulched all snug in their bed, while visions of show winners danced in my head. And Richard in his blanket, and I with the cat, had settled down for a long winter's chat. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from the chair to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the drapes, and threw up the sash, when what to my wondering eyes should appear but a miniature UPS truck and 8 tiny gardeners. With a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be St. Nick. More rapid than eagles, his workers they came, and he whistled and called them by name. Now Shepherd, now Appleseed, now Thompson and Morgan, on Wayside, on Burpee, on Parks and Starks. As the dry leaves that before the wild tornado fly, when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky. So onto the patio the gardeners flew, with a truck full of tools, plants, and flowers too. And then in a twinkling, I heard by the glade the digging and planting of each little blade. As I drew in my head and was turning around, past the sliding glass door, he came with a bound. He was dressed all in grubbies, mud boots on his feet, and his clothes were all soiled with mulches and peat. A bundle of tools, plants, and bulbs were on his back, and he looked like a nurseryman opening his pack. He spoke not a word, but went on with his work and landscaped the yard, then turned with a jerk. He sprang to his truck, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all drove like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim as he drove out of sight, "Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night." Well, I have to say, I saved the ending from the first poem by the Jensens because that one was my favorite, at least the last two sentences. I really liked them. Here's how they ended their poem. "And I heard him exclaim through the engine's loud hum, 'Merry Christmas to all, and to all a green thumb.'" Very sweet. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener this year, everyone. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Wyoming, Minnesota with the help of Paige Mance, Brooke Bierbaum, Kiana Rayleigh, Maddie Doyle, Natalie Decker, and Eric Begay. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media. You can follow the show on Instagram, and listeners always have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. All the stories and books that are featured on the show can be found over at thedailygardener.org, thedailygardener.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. Last but not least, you can share your own gardener greetings on the show by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow. Hi there, everyone, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's December 4th, 24th, December 24th. Oh my gosh.